Ibrahim Traoré just sent a warning that no one in West African diplomacy was prepared for. Not a press release, not a diplomatic note passed through back channels. A direct, public, unmistakable message aimed at one of the largest and most powerful nations on the African continent, Nigeria. And the message was not subtle. It was a warning about surveillance, espionage, sovereignty, and the very real possibility of retaliation. When a leader of a landlocked Sahelian nation under active jihadist pressure finds it necessary to publicly caution the president of a 200 million-person regional giant about American military presence on Nigerian soil, something significant has shifted in the geopolitical architecture of West Africa. This is not a routine diplomatic exchange. This is a signal calculated, deliberate, and loaded with implications that extend far beyond the immediate relationship between Ouagadougou and Abuja. To understand why this moment carries the weight it does, it is necessary to first understand the strategic geography that gives this warning its teeth. Burkina Faso and Niger share a long and porous border. Niger and Nigeria also share a border, one of the most significant in the region in terms of population movement, trade, and historically, security cooperation. The Alliance of Sahel States, the trilateral framework binding Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger together in an increasingly formalized political and security bloc, sits directly adjacent to Nigeria's northern frontier. If Nigeria were to permit American military infrastructure, intelligence operations, or surveillance systems to operate from its territory in proximity to that border, the alliance would effectively find itself flanked by a Western intelligence presence that it had no role in authorizing and no mechanism to control. From Traoré's perspective, that scenario is not hypothetical. It is an emerging operational reality that his government has apparently concluded requires a direct public response. The specific allegation embedded in this warning deserves careful analytical attention. The claim is not simply that American military presence in Nigeria is expanding. That is a matter of documented record and regional discussion. The more serious claim is that certain Nigerian officials are allegedly sharing sensitive information with Western powers, information about troop movements, resource activities, and leadership operations within the Alliance of Sahel States. If accurate, this would represent not merely a passive intelligence presence, but an active human intelligence operation running through Nigerian institutional channels and targeting the alliance's core security architecture. The gravity of that allegation, coming from the leader of one of the three alliance member states, should not be underestimated. It suggests that alliance intelligence services believe they have identified a specific information pipeline running from within Nigeria to Western intelligence consumers, and that Traoré has decided the most effective response is to make that belief public, forcing Abuja to either deny the allegation, investigate it, or be seen as complicit. This is where the calculation becomes genuinely complex. Nigeria under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has maintained a posture toward the Sahel juntas that combines institutional firmness with pragmatic realism. As the chair of ECOWAS during the critical period following the Niger coup of 2023, Tinubu took an initially hawkish position, endorsing ECOWAS' threats of military intervention that ultimately did not materialize. That episode left a residue of tension in the Nigeria-Alliance relationship that has never fully resolved. Tinubu's government subsequently moderated its approach as it became clear that military intervention was not a viable option and that the alliance states were not going to collapse under ECOWAS pressure. But the underlying tension between Nigeria's commitment to constitutional governance norms and the alliance's explicit rejection of those norms has remained a structural feature of the relationship. Traoré's warning lands into that existing tension, and it forces Tinubu to respond in a way that will be read carefully by multiple audiences simultaneously. Consider the position Tinubu now occupies. If he publicly dismisses Traoré's warning, he risks being perceived as either endorsing the alleged intelligence activities or being indifferent to alliance sovereignty concerns, neither of which serves Nigerian regional leadership ambitions. If he acknowledges the warning and takes visible steps to distance Nigerian territory from American surveillance operations targeting the Sahel, he risks straining his relationship with Washington at a moment when Nigeria has significant economic and security interests in maintaining American engagement. If he attempts to occupy a middle position, expressing commitment to good neighborly relations while neither confirming nor denying the specific allegations, he may satisfy neither party and simply defer a confrontation that will resurface in a more acute form. There is no clean exit from this situation. Each response carries costs, and the costs are distributed across relationships that Nigeria cannot afford to damage. Is this a targeted diplomatic maneuver by Traore, or the visible surface of a deeper and more sustained intelligence confrontation that has been developing beneath public awareness for months? The framing of the warning, public, explicit, and directed personally at Tinubu, suggests a deliberate escalation beyond whatever private communications may have already occurred. Governments do not typically make these kinds of allegations publicly unless they have concluded that private channels have been insufficient or that the public signal itself serves a strategic purpose. The public nature of this warning suggests that Traore's government wants this confrontation visible, wants the Nigerian public, the African Union, ECOWAS member states, and international observers to be aware that the alliance has identified what it considers an intelligence threat originating from Nigerian territory. That visibility serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It pressures Tinubu domestically, it signals alliance resolve to regional observers, and it puts Washington on notice that its intelligence activities in the region are being tracked and will be publicly attributed. The American military presence in Nigeria that forms the backdrop of this warning is itself a development that has received insufficient analytical attention in mainstream commentary. The United States has maintained various forms of military cooperation with Nigeria over the years, primarily framed around counterterrorism and support for Nigerian operations against Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province. As American military access across the Sahel has been progressively curtailed, with Niger ordering the removal of American forces following its 2023 coup, effectively ending a critical chapter in U.S. Sahel basing strategy. Nigeria has taken on increased strategic significance as a platform for American regional presence. The logic is straightforward. If American forces and intelligence capabilities can no longer operate from within the Sahel states themselves, the next best option is to operate from the periphery, from a large, stable, Western-aligned partner state whose northern territory sits adjacent to the alliance's southern flank. Nigeria, in this strategic geography, becomes the natural alternative basing environment. Traore's warning makes clear that the alliance has reached exactly this analytical conclusion, and that it views the development not as a routine bilateral security arrangement between Nigeria and the United States, but as a deliberate strategic repositioning of Western intelligence and military capability designed to compensate for the access losses suffered after the Sahel coups. From the alliance's perspective, the distinction between a Nigerian-American counterterrorism partnership and a Western intelligence platform targeting alliance leadership and resources is not meaningful. The infrastructure is the same. The proximity to alliance territory is the same. The potential for information collection that serves Western strategic interests at the alliance's expense is the same. Whether the Nigerian officials allegedly sharing sensitive information are doing so willingly, under instruction, or through compromised communication systems is a detail that matters legally and morally, but does not change the operational reality from Traore's perspective. The resource dimension of this confrontation should not be overlooked. The Alliance of Sahel States controls territory that contains significant deposits of gold, uranium, and increasingly documented lithium reserves. The management and protection of those resources has been a central preoccupation of all three alliance governments, each of which has pursued forms of resource nationalism that assert greater state control over extraction and revenue flows. Western intelligence interest in monitoring alliance resource activities, tracking production levels, export routes, revenue streams, and partnership arrangements with Russian and Chinese entities, is entirely consistent with known patterns of economic intelligence collection. If Nigerian officials are indeed sharing information about resource activities within alliance territory, that information would have direct economic and strategic value to Western powers seeking to understand the financial sustainability of the alliance governments and identify potential pressure points. Traore's linkage of the surveillance, concern to resources specifically, alongside troop movements and leadership activities, suggests that his government understands the multidimensional nature of the intelligence threat it believes it is facing. What happens in the next several weeks will reveal whether this warning produces a genuine shift in Nigerian-American alliance dynamics, or whether it is absorbed into the background noise of regional diplomatic tension without producing structural change. Several indicators will be worth watching closely. First, the Nigerian government's formal response or deliberate non-response to Traore's warning will signal how seriously Abuja takes the allegation and how it intends to balance its competing relationships. Second, any visible changes in American military activity or positioning in northern Nigeria would suggest that the warning has produced operational consequences beyond the diplomatic level. Third, the response from other ECOWAS member states will indicate whether Nigeria's peers view this as a bilateral issue between Ouagadougou and Abuja or as a regional security matter with broader implications for the bloc's coherence and positioning. The ECOWAS dimension of this situation is particularly significant. The bloc has already been severely weakened by the withdrawal of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Its remaining member states are navigating a complicated landscape in which they must maintain their institutional commitment to democratic governance norms, while also managing practical security and economic relationships with the alliance states that share borders, populations, and economic corridors with them. Nigeria, as the largest ECOWAS member state and the bloc's de facto anchor, faces this tension most acutely. A public accusation from Traore that Nigerian territory is being used to surveil and potentially destabilize alliance member states puts ECOWAS itself in an uncomfortable position. It implies that the bloc's largest member is either actively cooperating with Western intelligence operations against former member states or insufficiently vigilant about the use of its territory for such purposes. Neither implication is comfortable for an institution that has already lost significant credibility through its handling of the Sahel coups. The security implications for Nigeria's own northern regions deserve direct attention. Nigeria's north has been dealing with its own severe security challenges. Boko Haram remnants, ISWAP operations, banditry, and intercommunal conflict have created a chronic security environment that consumes substantial Nigerian military resources. The alliance states, particularly Niger, share this security challenge in the sense that the same jihadist networks operate across the border regions. There have been periods of practical security cooperation between Nigerian and Nigerian forces at the operational level, even as the political relationship between Abuja and Niamey deteriorated following the coup. Traore's warning risks disrupting whatever residual security cooperation exists in these border areas. Cooperation that serves both sides' interests in containing jihadist activity. If his warning is interpreted in Niamey and Ouagadougou as requiring a broader hardening of the alliance's posture toward Nigeria, including the suspension of border security coordination, the practical security consequences for both Nigerian and alliance border communities could be severe. This is where the stakes become clear for regional populations who are not part of any geopolitical calculation, but whose safety depends on the functioning of cross-border security arrangements that political leaders are now putting at risk through a confrontation driven by great power competition. The communities in northern Nigeria, southern Niger, and northern Burkina Faso that have been navigating jihadist violence, displacement, and economic disruption for years have no stake in whether American intelligence services have access to Sahelian troop movement data. They have a very immediate stake in whether the security forces on both sides of their borders are talking to each other. When geopolitical confrontations between governments disrupt operational security cooperation at the border level, it is civilian populations who absorb the resulting security gaps, not the leaders making the warnings and the counter-warnings from distant capitals. The Russian factor in this dynamic operates at multiple levels. Moscow has been the primary external security partner for all three alliance member states, providing military equipment, personnel, and, critically, intelligence support that has helped alliance governments manage their security environments without Western assistance. Russian intelligence services have a direct interest in the outcome of the confrontation Traore has initiated with Nigeria. If the warning succeeds in pressuring Nigeria to limit American military presence or intelligence activities near alliance borders, it represents a tangible operational win for Russian strategic positioning in the region, achieved without direct Russian involvement, through the diplomatic agency of an alliance partner. If the warning fails to produce any change in Nigerian-American arrangements, Russian intelligence will need to recalibrate its assessment of the vulnerability of alliance security operations to peripheral surveillance. There is also a question about the origin and quality of the intelligence that underlies Traore's specific allegations. The claim that certain Nigerian officials are sharing sensitive information about alliance troop movements and leadership activities with Western powers is a serious accusation that presumably rests on some form of intelligence collection, intercepted communications, human source reporting, or analytical inference from observed patterns. The specificity of the allegation, naming troop movements, resources, and leadership activities as the categories of information being shared, suggests more than general suspicion. Whether this intelligence is accurate, partially accurate, or the product of deliberate misinformation designed to drive a wedge between Nigeria and the United States is a question that external analysts cannot resolve without access to the underlying sources. What can be said is that Traore's government has evidently concluded that the intelligence is credible enough to justify a public accusation, a threshold that represents a significant escalation from whatever private concerns may have preceded this statement. The framing of potential retaliation in Traore's warning is the element that carries the most immediate risk of miscalculation. When the leader of a government engaged in an active counterinsurgency campaign, facing severe security challenges across a vast and poorly controlled territory, describes the use of neighboring territory for foreign-backed espionage as a potential act of aggression, he is implicitly reserving the right to respond to that aggression through means that go beyond diplomatic protest. What form such retaliation might take is deliberately left undefined, and that deliberate ambiguity is itself a strategic tool. It maximizes the pressure on Tinubu by leaving him uncertain about the consequences of an action, while allowing Traore to calibrate any actual response to whatever the situation subsequently requires. But deliberate ambiguity in security warnings also carries the risk of misreading, of a responding party interpreting the threshold for retaliation differently than the warning party intends, with consequences that neither side actually wants. The broader continental audience for this confrontation should not be underestimated. Across Africa, governments are watching the evolution of the Alliance of Sahel States with a combination of concern, calculation, and in some cases, quiet admiration for the alliance's willingness to confront Western power structures publicly and persistently. Traore's warning to Tinubu will be read in multiple African capitals, not just as a bilateral diplomatic exchange, but as a demonstration of how a relatively small, resource-constrained, conflict-affected government can use strategic communication and public pressure to impose costs on much larger actors. If the warning produces visible results, any change in Nigerian behavior, any American adjustment of its regional positioning, any shift in how the Nigeria-alliance relationship is publicly discussed, it will reinforce the perception that the alliance's confrontational approach generates leverage that more accommodating postures do not. For the United States, this development creates a specific challenge in its efforts to rebuild strategic presence in the Sahel region following the access losses of the post-coup period. The American investment in maintaining and deepening security cooperation with Nigeria has been partly premised on the strategic value of Nigerian geography as an alternative platform for regional presence. If that platform becomes politically contested, if Nigeria faces public accusations from alliance states about hosting American surveillance operations and is forced to visibly manage the resulting diplomatic pressure, the operational value of Nigerian basing and cooperation arrangements is diminished. American planners will need to assess whether the current level of activity in northern Nigeria is producing intelligence value commensurate with the diplomatic costs it is now visibly imposing on a key Nigerian alliance relationship. The trajectory of this confrontation from this point forward will be shaped by decisions made in Abuja, Washington, and Ouagadougou over the coming weeks. Decisions about how to respond publicly, how to adjust operational arrangements quietly, and how to manage the domestic political dimensions of a confrontation that has now been placed firmly in the public domain. None of these decisions will be easy. All of them will be watched, and the outcomes will contribute to a regional geopolitical pattern that is still very much in formation, a pattern in which the boundaries of acceptable external presence in West Africa, the limits of alliance sovereignty enforcement, and the future role of Nigeria as a regional anchor are all being renegotiated simultaneously. What Traore has done with this warning is force a set of questions that no actor in the region was quite ready to answer publicly. Can Nigeria simultaneously maintain its Western security partnerships and its relationships with alliance border states without one compromising the other? Can the United States sustain a meaningful regional intelligence presence in the face of alliance governments willing to publicly name and confront that presence? Can the alliance enforce its sovereignty claims against peripheral surveillance without the military capacity to directly contest American intelligence infrastructure? And perhaps most fundamentally, is the security architecture of West Africa moving toward a genuine multipolar equilibrium in which African governments exercise meaningful agency over external military and intelligence presence? Or is this confrontation simply the latest episode in a longer cycle of resistance and adaptation that ultimately leaves the underlying power asymmetries intact? Those questions do not have answers today, but the fact that they are being asked publicly by a Sahelian leader addressing one of Africa's largest powers tells us something important about where the region is heading. The Sahel is no longer a passive theater of great power competition. It is an active participant in shaping the terms of that competition. And Ibrahim Traoré, whatever the ultimate strategic outcome of this particular confrontation, has once again demonstrated that the most consequential moves in African geopolitics are no longer being made only in Washington, Paris, or Moscow. Some of them are being made in Ouagadougou, and the world is being forced to pay attention. What Traoré has set in motion with this warning cannot be quietly walked back. The words are public. The accusation is specific. The threshold for retaliation has been stated. And in geopolitics, public statements of this nature create their own momentum. They force responses, generate positions, and establish precedents that shape every interaction that follows. Nigeria must now respond in a way that satisfies multiple audiences simultaneously. The alliance is watching to see whether Abuja treats this warning with the seriousness it demands. Washington is watching to see whether Tinubu holds firm or bends under alliance pressure. African publics are watching to see whether the largest economy on the continent will allow its territory to become a staging ground for surveillance operations against its neighbors. There is no response available to Nigeria that does not carry a significant cost in at least one of these directions. The deeper significance of this moment extends well beyond the specific allegation about Nigerian officials and American surveillance infrastructure. What Traore has actually done is establish a new norm, or attempted to establish one, in which alliance member states claim the right to publicly define, name, and warn against external intelligence activities that they consider threats to their sovereignty, regardless of where those activities are physically based. This is a meaningful expansion of the sovereignty assertion that the alliance has been building since its formation. It moves the boundary of claimed sovereign protection from inside alliance territory to the surrounding geographic environment, including the territory of neighboring states. If that norm is accepted, even partially, it fundamentally changes the operating environment for any external power seeking to maintain intelligence presence near alliance borders. Russia benefits from this norm expansion without having to assert it directly. China observes it without being implicated. The United States faces it as a direct operational constraint. And Nigeria finds itself involuntarily positioned at the center of a sovereignty confrontation it did not initiate and cannot easily exit. For the people of the Sahel, the farmers, the displaced families, the communities surviving at the intersection of jihadist violence and geopolitical competition, this confrontation between governments and great powers remains distant from the immediate reality of daily survival. But the decisions being made in these diplomatic exchanges will shape the security environment those communities live in for years to come. Whether external powers are permitted to operate surveillance infrastructure near alliance borders, whether border security cooperation between Nigeria and alliance states survives this political confrontation, whether the region moves toward greater instability or toward a negotiated equilibrium. All of these outcomes will be felt most acutely not in Washington or Moscow, or even Ouagadougou, but in the villages and border communities that have already paid the highest price for the Sahels. Decades of compounding crisis. The warning has been issued. The clock is now running. And what happens next will tell us whether the Alliance of Sahel States has the leverage to enforce the boundaries it is drawing, or whether this moment becomes another chapter in a longer story of resistance without resolution.